I am the villain of the story. And with those chilling words, Michael Rosenbaum cemented himself as the greatest live action portrayal of Lex Luthor ever. Hello, everyone. This is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and today I am here to discuss with all of you my thoughts on why Michael Rosenbaum remains unmatched as the greatest Lex Luthor of all time. Now, I've been a fan of Superman for many, many years since the first time I watched the cartoons back in the 1990s. But although I do like most of Superman's villains, Brainiac being my all time favourite, Darkseid, Metallo, General Zod, to name a few, but the one villain that I have never got along with and I've never fully clicked with him was Lex Luthor because I've never bought into the idea that a human could cause an alien so much trouble. I mean, I would understand and respect if Lex Luthor had powers and was on the same level as Superman in terms of strength department, then yes, I probably would give him a free pass. But the fact that Lex Luthor has been Superman's main enemy for so many years has always bothered me because I feel that Lex Luthor has been way too overexposed. He's virtually been in every Superman movie, barring Superman 3. And I just never bought into it. I just thought, how can this human cause so much trouble to an alien? I just never bought into it. So when Smallville came out, I initially didn't get into the show at first because I just couldn't get into the idea of a show where Clark wasn't Superman. You know, he didn't have his costume, his powers weren't fully developed, and it was going to focus more on his high school years. I just couldn't really get into that idea or that concept. But as time went on, I started getting into the show more, and then I started buying all of the DVD box sets. And the story that they were telling was Clark Kent and Lex Luthor were best of friends when they were younger, something that they did do in the old Superboy comics many years earlier. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. This is something that's never really been explored much in media in regards to Superman. So when I saw Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor, he instantly won me over because a lot of the portrayals of Lex Luthor I have seen in the past, not so much in animation, but in live action, they've always been silly. You know, they've always been very goofy. Michael Shearer is an exception. You know, his Lex Luthor in Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman TV series. Yes, he was a bit goofy, but for the most part, from the scenes I've seen anyway, he was played down to be downright evil and more of a crime boss. And I like that because I've always liked the idea of Lex Luthor being this guy you knew who was a criminal, but you couldn't prove it. I've always liked that version of Lex Luthor. And that's something that they did quite well in the animated series of the 1990s going into the 2000s. And just watching Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor was just a blast because he wasn't portrayed as this silly goofball that we've seen before. This Lex Luthor started out as not a pretty bad guy. He seemed like a good person, and he was just constantly at the mercy and abuse of his dad, Lionel Luthor. And Lex Luthor always prided himself in that he was never going to turn out to be like his dad. He was going to be a better person until he met Clark Kent. And, you know, Clark Kent saving his life on the bridge, I thought that was a great way to kick off the whole Clark Kent Lex Luthor story because The stories I remember in the comics was, depending on what you read or depending on what you remember, is I always remembered Lex Luthor in the comic books. He was like a young tractor driver, and it's caught fire, and Superboy put out the fire with his super breath, and it blew all Lex's hair off, and that's what led to him being bald. And Lex Luthor was obsessed with getting revenge for Superboy robbing him of his hair. I just thought that was so stupid. But in Smallville, Lex Luthor lost his hair as a result of a meteor shower, which was the day Clark arrived on Earth. I thought that was a much better story. And, from the first time that they met each other, Lex was obsessed with how the car didn't leave a mark on Clark. How did he save him? And he just became obsessed. And I thought that was very good writing. And these little quotes that Lex Luthor would come out with, about Genghis Khan and Julius Caesar. I just thought it was amazing. I just thought, wow, this portrayal of Lex Luthor was almost like Shakespearean. It was absolutely amazing to watch. And as each season progressed in Smallville, you could see Lex Luthor was trying so desperately not to embrace the dark side. It was almost like, I don't know, think of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars. You knew Anakin Skywalker was a good person, but that lure, that temptation, the power of the dark side, he was just so driven by it. And of course, having someone like Emperor Palpatine in your ear isn't going to do you a lot of favors. But with Lex Luthor in Smallville, his biggest enemy was himself because he just wouldn't let go of the past. He was just obsessed with Clark. And in some ways, he kind of was jealous because, here is Clark Kent. He had Jonathan and Martha Kent, these two amazing human beings, two amazing parents who just gave Clark all the love and warmth in the world. He had Lana Lang as his girlfriend. He had everything that Lex Luthor wanted. And I love that story. And Michael Rosenbaum's performances was always the highlight of the show. And even when Lex Luthor embraced the dark side eventually after pushing Lionel Luthor out of the window in season 7, I just thought, that's it. Lex has finally gone over the edge. He's embraced the dark side, and there's no coming back. We've seen teases before, like in season 4 when Lex Luthor was exposed to black kryptonite, and that split him into the good side and his bad side. We got a little tease of how evil Lex Luthor really was, and I'll never forget that line when evil Lex met Clark, and Clark said to him, Lex Luthor would never try to kill me. And the evil Lex said, no, you're probably right. He wouldn't. But he has thought about it. I just thought that was one of Michael Rosenbaum's greatest performances ever on the show. And, when Jonathan Kent yelled at him, said, what do you want, Lex? And Lex said, the world, Mr. Kent. It was just incredible. And that said to me that we are watching the greatest Lex Luthor ever. I've never cared for Lex Luthor. I've never liked Lex Luthor. I've never had time for him. But Smallville made me care about Lex Luthor. I still don't like him to this day. No, that's never going to change. But when I get asked what's the greatest live action portrayal of Lex Luthor, without hesitation, I'll say Michael Rosenbaum in Smallville. Not even a no brainer. He was just tremendous. And after 7 seasons of storytelling, Lex finally learned the truth about Clark, and we had that big epic scene in the season 7 finale. And to me, Lex Luthor, you know, you know, all the stuff that happened all finally paid off, and Michael Rosenbaum just delivered once again. You know, of course, with any character, they're only as good as they're written. And of course, when they're as good as they're written, you have a great actor behind that to make it work. And Michael Rosenbaum was, without a doubt, the best casting ever for Lex Luthor. I don't know if anybody else could have played him as well as he did. I'm sure there's others out there, but I think Michael Rosenbaum was just untouchable as Lex Luthor. He was just phenomenal. And that scene, as I mentioned earlier in season 7, when he finally learned the truth, and that line he said, "Well, this is a big step up from the barn, Clark. You see, you pretend to be a mild mannered farm boy when secretly you're an alien plotting our demise. And the best thing about it is, you didn't even have to wear a mask." I thought, wow. And the stuff he came out with after and said, "Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped you. I could have made you into a hero. Have you ever thought about what we could have accomplished together?" Again, even though he's already turned bad, he's still thinking about himself. He's not thinking about, "I could have helped you become a hero." He is more thinking about himself. Have you ever thought about what we could have done together? It's always including himself. And I felt that after Michael Rosenbaum left the show, Smallville was still great, but I just felt that when he was gone, the magic went with him. Even when John Glover left the show as well, I feel that same way as well. But with Michael Rosenbaum in particular, 7 seasons, you know, top-notch dialogue, epic scenes with Tom Welling, Kristen Crook. He just owned every scene with every person he worked with, and he was dearly missed. And I was under the impression that he probably would never, come back to the show. So when they announced that season 10 that Lex Luthor was going to come back, I thought, okay, if you're going to end the show, you've got to have Michael Rosenbaum back for the final episode. And they did. And he came back. And even though he only had, I think he had about 3 scenes in the season 10 finale, he owned it like he always did. And he was a cool reminder to all of us that, yeah, I'm back now. I'm reminding all of you who was the man of the show. Tom Welling, he was great as Clark Kent, the best ever, probably. But I don't think he would have been as good if he didn't have someone like Michael Rosenbaum to bounce off of, because the old saying is the hero is only as good as the villain he faces. And what makes good storytelling is when you have a great hero bouncing off a great villain. So when you got the two together, special stuff's going to happen. It's the same with Batman and the Joker. As great as all of the Batman villains are, there's only one Joker, and Batman and the Joker, they've been ripping each other's heads off since the 40s. Same with the Flash, Mirror Master, Grodd, you know, Captain Cold, they're all great, but there's only one Reverse Flash, there's only one Eobard Thawne. And, Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor was just perfect. He was the ultimate villain. And they hinted it in season 2 that Lex Luthor, you know, could possibly be the ultimate opponent. And they even mentioned it again in season 9 that Lex Luthor will be your greatest opponent, Clark, and you will overcome him. So it was tremendous. And I think, in my opinion anyway, no one's going to match Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor. Now we know Nicholas Hoult has been cast to play Lex Luthor in Superman Legacy. He's got some pretty big shoes to fill. So we'll see how he does. But out of all of the actors who have played Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman, Michael Shear, you know, Michael Rosenbaum, Kevin Spacey, Jesse Eisenberg, who I won't even go any further than that. You know, there's been so many great actors who have played Lex Luthor, but for me, Michael Rosenbaum is the man. You know, Obviously, there's a few more actors I may have missed out on, but I don't really remember all of their names. But those are the guys I remember the most. But for me, Michael Rosenbaum remains to this day unmatched as the greatest Lex Luthor of all time, period. And for me, his greatest performance as Lex Luthor was in season 4 when Lex Luthor was exposed to black kryptonite and he had this split personality, good versus bad. I thought that was his best performance as ever because we got a little taste of what Lex Luthor could be like in the future. And Michael Rosenbaum owned that. He owned everything from season 1 to 7 and 10, but that episode in season 4, unmatched. That to me, he cemented himself as the best ever. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. Do you agree with my thoughts and opinions on why Michael Rosenbaum is the greatest Lex Luthor portrayal of all time? What's your favourite moments from Michael Rosenbaum's time in Smallville? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening, and remember, he is the villain of the story.